Hey, welcome back to another episode of the She's Making an Impact podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Ngom. Today, let's talk about the top lessons I learned in 2021. We're almost done with 2021, which I'm like, what? Time goes by really fast. And I thought, like, what are some of the top lessons that I have learned over this past year? It's been kind of a crazy year. So if you don't know, we spent the first 6 months of this year living in Senegal, West Africa, where we've been starting up different businesses, creating more income streams for our family. My husband is actually there again right now. He's been gone for 2 days, and I'm like, when are you coming home? He's only gone for 2 weeks, thanks God. But I miss him, even though I know he's doing amazing things while he's there and he's so busy. So top lessons learned in 2021. Let's actually start with Senegal and everything there. So I actually recorded a podcast of the top lessons learned living in Africa. That's episode 266. My son is in that one because he learned a lot living in Senegal. Such a cool experience for him to be able to, like go back to his roots, where his daddy's from. And it's just completely different than where we are right now in the suburbs of Orlando, and for him to have that experience. So go back and listen to the episode because there's a lot that we learned in Africa. I've lived in Africa before, so a lot of it wasn't necessarily new for me, but for him, seeing things through his eyes was really cool. And so we made the decision when we came back over the summer. I think we came back in June. I don't even know. We came back over the summer at some point. I'm like, what day is it? What year is it? What's happening? I don't know. And we made the decision after being here. So we were living in Senegal, bought tickets to come to America for like a month or two over the summer, and then had the intention of going back to Senegal. And after being here for less than a week, my husband and I made the decision to stay in America. It was literally looking at our son and all the camps and his friends and like the neighborhood we're in. And we're like, he does not have the same opportunities in Senegal. As cool. Like there are different opportunities for growth, obviously, but for him to have like just the world open to him of like, he got to coach with like a formal MLB baseball player, like just some of the things that he's been able to do since we've been back has been really, really cool. And he told us flat out, like, I want to stay in America. I have all my friends here. And we're like, okay, we'll make this work. So top lesson number 1, need to be willing to let go of how you thought it would be. Because we had every intention. I still have some of my stuff there. I was like, Alphonse, can you bring me back my other podcast microphone, my headphones, my sandals? Like I left everything. Be willing, like it just open for life to unfold differently than how you thought it would. I had to go through like the grieving process of like, oh man, like we were going to be there and now we're in America and all those things, all those feelings. But like my husband and I keep saying, like, we made the right decision. We made the right decision. We made the right decision. Like seeing our son and everything he's been able, and seeing our daughter too, who like, she's now, I'm going to call her bilingual. She's almost 21 months, but half her words are in French. Half of them are in English. I speak with her in French, as does my husband. Cause I'm like, cause our son is bilingual and I'm like, I want you to be bilingual till even if we're in America. And once France calms down and lets people tourist back in, I want to spend summers in France, and just have that like a broad experience. Cause we lived in France for 2 years, we lived in Senegal for 6 months. Like I love living abroad, so much. If it were my decision, me and my husband's decision, we'd be in France in a heartbeat, but we know we're here for now, and then we'll spend summers in France. So that is like part of the vision, is buying a property in France and we can turn it into an Airbnb. Okay. Number 2 lesson I learned in 2021 is don't blindly trust experts for everything. And so one of the things I just had a major growth year. I consider myself a very coachable person, and that specifically comes from, playing volleyball for a decade of being very coachable. Kind of have to be of like your coach tells you to do something, you gotta do it. And it was the same thing with like my business coach. She would tell me to do something and I would do it like exactly as she did it. And what that meant is I didn't really think for myself like I should have been. And so that's something I really started to do this year is like she'd give me a strategy, but then I'd look at it really critically of like, is this exactly how I would do it intuitively? And would this really land with my audience the way that I think it should? Or so I did, like I would take the overall strategy, but then I would put Rachel's twist on it and maybe make little tweaks based off of my own gut intuition. So that was definitely like a big lesson learned for me in my my year of growth in 2021. And other experts, so if you don't know, I've had a rib injury. So I played volleyball at the University of Illinois and I tore cartilage in my rib cage. I was medically released from the team, which was such a huge blessing in disguise, one of the hardest times of my life. Because if you ever do anything at that level for that level, like amount of time. So I did this for a decade of like 6 days a week, 5 hours a day, up until I was 20. Like my identity was a volleyball player, like being in the newspaper and, all these things. Like I was a volleyball player. And so when I had that injury and I didn't have that identity anymore, I was like, who am I without this? So blessing in disguise, I found myself. I got the opportunity to move to Africa, ended up meeting my husband, completely transformed my life. So anyways, after that, I actually dislocated my ribs in 2017 and have been, getting injections and seeing all different kinds of doctors to kind of manage the pain from that and to get them to stay back in place because they're so painful. And I actually went to a new chiropractor about 2 months ago. And it was like one of those things where I had this feeling of it didn't feel right. Like, I'm like, she looks kind of young. Does she know what she's doing? And after like within a minute of her adjusting me, she like ripped out my entire rib cage, like dislocated every single rib. And I was like, I literally didn't move. Like I was on a heating pad on the couch for a good month. Like I didn't work out, didn't do, like it was so painful, so painful. And so that's a lesson in don't blindly trust experts. And I've really had to become like my own doctor and figure out how to heal myself. And I actually found like a specialist, because I've seen so many doctors for this, but I found it like a thoracic surgeon who specializes in rib issues. I don't know if I want to get surgery necessarily, but seeing someone who actually knows their stuff. But that's one of the lessons, like don't blindly trust experts. You got to think critically, think for yourself, be your own advocate, be your own doctor, and don't trust everyone as much as I do. Okay. Lesson number 3, we never make it and you need to get out of complacency. And so I recorded a podcast on how we went from food stamps to millionaires and how nothing has really changed. And so we have that next goal, that next vision. A lot of times, especially when I was like newer in entrepreneurship and I was younger, I think like, ooh, when I reach this goal, then I'll have made it and I'll feel successful and I'll be successful. And it really doesn't work that way. It's like you hit that level and then you're like, ooh, what's next? Like, what's that next thing that I'm going to work towards? And so you got to make sure you never get stuck in complacency and you always have that what's next to work towards, because you're either growing or you're dying. There's no like staying still. So you got to make sure that you continue to grow always and put yourself in that growth environment. Number 4, content fatigue is real. So I've had an online business for 10 years, more than that now. Yeah, more. Wow. Just growing up over here. And so I've definitely experienced content fatigue specifically this year. I'm like, I've said everything there is to say. I don't know what else to say. And so what that has forced me to do is to find new ways to grow. And then also knowing that that's normal. So a book that I read, or I listened to, let's be real, I listened to this book, Craig Groeschel's book. It's called Winning the War in Your Mind. And in the book, he talks about how he's the pastor of like if not the most successful church in America, one of the most Life Church. And he created the YouVersion Bible app. And he's like, I hit a point where I spoke a sermon on everything I knew to speak a sermon on, and I had nothing else to say. And he went through this like anxiety pit. And I'm so grateful for him and him sharing that experience, because I'm like, oh, it's normal. I'm not alone in like experiences. And so I think that's like one of the biggest lessons, is like knowing that you're not alone when you're doing this, and learning from other people of how they've experienced some of like the hardships, the struggles that you have. So, you know, like, hey, this is a normal experience. Next lesson, know the kind of business that you want to have and not the business that experts tell you you should have or you should want. So this really made me think of, you know, one of the mentors that I've had over the past couple of years, how she has, you know, it's like a $30 million business with over 30 employees. And like, as I've, you know, seen her and I thought about like what I want, I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want to have 30 employees. I don't necessarily like having a $30 million business is cool, but I'm like, what do I ultimately want? I want to be able to retire a family, have a really great income so we can make a greater impact on the world, being able to give back. Does that look like having 30 plus employees running a $30 million business? Not necessarily. And I'm like, what do I ultimately want? You know, like, so you got to think of this goes back to like, don't blindly trust experts. Of know what it is that you really want. What's the kind of business that you want? What's the lifestyle that you want to have? And it doesn't have to look like you have a $30 million business. Because when I think about that, like, to me, it feels heavy and stressful, which maybe I'm not at the level of well, I know I'm not at the level of leadership to have that kind of a business, and that's okay. It's not in my desire at this point. I'd rather have a small business that has much higher profit margin, that gives me more freedom, flexibility with less stress, headache, overhead, overwhelm, all those things. That's just me, but you got to know what you want. YOLO, you only live once. You got to do what sets your heart on fire. Don't settle for anything less than that. Don't hold on to grudges or anything silly. Like, I think this was the year that I really realized just like how fast time goes, how important family is. And I'm like looking at my son who's now 8. I'm like, how did this happen? You're huge. You're so big. And I'm like, I was cuddling him this morning. I'm like, cuddle your mama. Hug and cuddle often. Like, know what's really important to you. I love work. I love what I do, but ultimately, most important thing for me always is family. They will always come first. And then YOLO comes down to like, what are some really fun, cool things that you want to do? So my mom and I we have 2 trips planned already for next year. I'm like, COVID, you're getting out of the way. I'm not move along now. I got things to do. So we're going to Machu Picchu in the spring. We're going to climb Machu Picchu, and then Ed Sheeran is doing a tour in Europe. So we're going to go to Switzerland and see him. When we were living in France, I made my husband and son and dog, we all drove to Amsterdam so I could see Ed Sheeran in concert. So we're going on with that theme of going to Europe, chasing Ed, because Ed is the man. He's like my favorite. Ed Sheeran, Justin Bieber, my 2 loves. Don't judge me. I'm making TJ go see Justin Bieber with me in concert. He's coming here to Orlando. Okay, so those are some of my top lessons learned. Like, I wrote down, like, I'm like, what happened this year? Like, a lot has happened. I'll add some. Let me add a little more. You're going to have great launches, and you're going to have launches that don't necessarily go as well. And when you have things that don't necessarily go as well, you always know that it's not you that failed. You always have to separate yourself from what happened in your business and say, just get curious about it and be like, well, that didn't go as well as I anticipated. What happened? You know, like, what could I have done better? Or where was the disconnect there? It's not you that sucks, and it's not you that's a failure. It's just something that there might have been a disconnect with the audience. Maybe the offer didn't land the way that it was supposed to. And that's going to happen. And so we had some of that. We had great launches, then we had launches that didn't go so well. And so you got to get curious about it and ask yourself, well, why did that not go as well? And then another lesson learned was we actually let go of someone that was higher up on our team, and the lesson learned there was, I think I just held on to him for too long. Of the, I don't know why I don't know, he was on our team for like 8 or 9 months, and I like let's see, best way to put this, he was a great person, loved having him on the team, just wasn't producing the way that he should have been for the amount of money that I was paying to have him on the team. And so being able to make those decisions quicker is something that I get to work on, of not getting so emotionally attached to people on our team, which I always do because I love everyone that I work with. And being able to make those decisions faster is another lesson learned. So I want to know, what are some of the top lessons that you learned in 2021? How did you grow? What's your game plan for 2022? Send me a message on Instagram at She's Making an Impact, and I would love to know. And take a screenshot, tag me at She's Making an Impact, and let me know what was some of your biggest lessons learned from this episode. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.